Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. If I tell you who I am and where this happened, I will definitely be arrested. So, I'll just say that I'm part of a crew that was hired to clean up after one of the recent protests that turned violent on government property. No, I'm not talking about the government building. Violence wasn't the first thing to happen there. American politics are all about suits and ties. It just hasn't been talked about as much. Before batons and tear gas could turn the tide, many offices were pretty badly trashed. When you have to clean up, you realize how much paper is in government buildings. File cabinets and desks were kicked over, and drawers were stacked and dumped out. It looked like a war zone. This wasn't like other projects that cleaned up government property for whatever reason. This time, they wanted to destroy all papers and other ways to store information. If we did a job well, we got paid 3 times as much. If we told anyone about what we found, we could spend the rest of our lives in jail. So, we went into the job with a good attitude. I didn't understand why you would keep such sensitive information in a place where anyone could come and go. But it made sense to hide some things where no one would ever look for them, which was also part of our assignment. Every last piece of paper, flash drive disk and binder, both new and old, had been gathered up and sent away to be burned. I was part of the last round of checking to make sure nothing had been missed. We went our separate ways and checked all the floors that had fallen behind a shelf. On a lower level, there was only one VHS tape. I hadn't seen any other VHS tapes in the building. That was the only time I wondered if going to prison for the rest of my life was worth the risk. I kept it, and I got it out of the building without getting caught. I didn't have high hopes for the tape. It would probably just be a personal project that had something to do with an inventory manifest. During the first 10 minutes, the camera sat on a table and filmed what looked like an empty cage. It was all metal, and the bar looked like it weighed a lot. There were many different locks, levers, and even gears. I might have seen buckles and straps that didn't make sense. Then the movie went to a different part where the cage was being used. Whatever it was unhappy that it had to be in the cage. No one could stand or sit in it. The prison? Could have been a grave for an animal. I wanted to think it was some kind of gorilla, but even gorillas don't get that big, and they don't make scary noises either. Because the tape was so grainy, it was impossible to tell what the black shape in the cage looked like. Another cut to a small, square-shaped room with no windows or doors that can be seen. A man with tattoos from head to toe was looking around with a very confused look on his face. He looked like he might have been a prisoner. He said something in Spanish in a low voice. He moved along each wall as if looking for a way out. He didn't seem to know that there was a camera watching, and a screen with the words Training 03 written by hand came up. The camera went back to the prisoner, but a lot was happening around him. He was shouting and babbling while leaning against the wall. He looked up and saw a tall, black shape coming toward him. It had a lot of muscle and fur, like a person in a Halloween costume. The thing moved in a way that looked like it slapped the man on the cheek. His cheek was cut up into small pieces, and the inside of his mouth was visible. His tongue moved as he wailed in pain and smeared blood all over the floor. The more the shape tore the man apart, the more I realized it wasn't someone in a costume. This huge creature was slowly tearing the man apart from skin to bones, and it seemed to enjoy the experience. For the short time the man had lips, I think I heard him say a prayer. After that, his face was gone. The animal looked at his body as if it was something to study. It didn't like what the man was saying or doing. So it put its paw on his throat, which wasn't covered. you could see it getting torn into pieces. The video then switched to a different human prisoner. This time it was a woman, and she was also killed in the same way. This time, the person or thing was facing the camera more, and it looked exactly like a werewolf should. I really wanted it to be a costume, but it didn't have that fake look that you would expect from a mask. Everything was so alive and moving, and it was full of the intelligence of a killer who hunts. There were ticks and twitches that a costume could not imitate. The woman did not die slowly. The tape had a lot more, but I couldn't watch it. I went over every part of the government building in my mind, but I couldn't think of anything that might have been a clue. There might have been a sublevel, which puts me back where I was before I decided to send this story in. What do you do when something like this is known to have happened? I can't show the tape for obvious reasons, and I don't dare say who would put together such horrible things. If that really was what the US government did, what did they want to get done? I'm going to tell you about something that was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. I've spent a lot of time in the wilderness, so I feel pretty good about knowing what's around me, and what I might run into. But I can't say for sure this time. So, I want to make this happen. I wasn't exactly hiking in the woods, getting lost, or doing anything else fun. I was in Central Oregon at the time, just outside of Redmond, which, for those who don't know, is the meth capital of the whole country. It's not a very poor place. So I don't know why there's so much meth in the area outside of Redmond, which is mostly desert. And rattlesnakes and other dangerous animals are hiding. So you need to watch out. Well, I won't go into details because it's kind of embarrassing, but let's just say that he did it because he lost a bet. I was kind of in the middle of nowhere and had been stuck there for hours without a ride or anyone to pick me up. So I'm out in the middle of nowhere trying to find my way back to the road when I see something moving far away. Now, this isn't like the typical Arizona-New Mexico desert, where it gets so hot that you start to see things that aren't there. I mean, it's a desert. It's still hot, then. But what I saw from a long way away wasn't a typical desert illusion like palm trees and an oasis. No, it looks like a big, straight-backed dog walking away from me in the opposite direction of where I was going. It got up from behind some bushes and started to walk. This thing was tall and black, and the first thing I noticed about it was its long ears that had been cut off. It kind of looked like the head of a German shepherd, but it was all black, and its ears were very long and pointed. It looked like it had a furry dog suit for a body. Whatever it was, it had long, big claws, and I could see it from where I was. It was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and it was also spring. I was about 75 yards from her. If I had to guess, this thing probably just walked away until I couldn't see it anymore. I don't know what it was doing, why it was there, or where it came from, and I don't even know what it was, but it scared me. When I found the main road and my friends picked me up hours later, I told them a little bit about it. They just laughed at me and said I must have taken some mushrooms or LSD, but I hadn't, and I know for sure what I saw the first time I saw it. All the strange things about it made me think that it could have been someone in a suit or that my friends were playing a joke on me. But as it walked farther and I looked at it longer, I became more and more scared because I realized that none of these things made sense. And I was looking at a standing animal that neither I nor anyone else had ever talked about or even heard of. I didn't know much at all about Bigfoot. I had heard of him, but I don't think he looked like a straight dog. This had nothing to do with that. So, a little time went by, and I tried to learn more about the subject. Well, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure I saw some kind of Dogman creature. This thing was in the desert for some reason. Why? I'm not sure. And do you see them often in this part of Oregon? I don't know either, but what I saw that day will stay with me forever. I was trying to go a long way on foot, like Forrest Gump, but I was on a bike. I'm smart enough not to run everywhere. It made the country look bigger in some ways. In other ways, it made it seem bigger, but in too many ways, it made it seem like a place with secrets we weren't supposed to know about. I was biking in rural Indiana when I came across a small wood. Most people probably know that the woods in the middle of the country are just a small group of trees. There were miles of cornfields on both sides and in all directions, so I didn't think my camping out in the small patch of trees would be a big problem for anyone. I'm sure it was someone's property, but I bet they were miles away, most likely having dinner. So, I made my bed as well as I could, since I was miles from any house and in the middle of a thick group of trees. I suppose there have been worse places to spend the night. I would mostly have to worry about mosquitoes, coyotes, and whatever snakes live in the Midwest. I wouldn't have to worry about bears or anything else dangerous. By the time I went to bed and closed my eyes, I felt very calm and like I had nothing to worry about. I was quickly asleep, but it didn't last long. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of what I thought were footsteps, but I couldn't see where they were coming from. Since there were open fields on all sides, that meant that wherever the sounds were coming from, they were coming from very close by. I yelled out into the darkness just in case the owner of the property was coming to see me. Also, I wouldn't want to be told to leave with a shotgun shoved in my face. But nobody answered. I gave a short summary of who I was and what I was doing. No one talked to me about this. Unlike what I thought, I didn't think twice about getting my flashlight when I saw it, 2 eyes staring back at me. They were so still that they could have been on a sculpture. I hoped that was the case. I turned on my flashlight and shined it right into their eyes, which made them blink. They were the color of coppery amory, and seemed to glow in a way that wasn't natural. They were in the face of what could have been a man in the past, except that the face and body were covered in a shaggy rug. It made me think of satin a lot. With the size and shape of this thing, you might have thought I was being visited by a Bigfoot. I've already seen them. Trust me, I'm a believer. But this face was not at all like that. I thought the face looked more like a dog's because it had a snout. A muzzle, if you will. Even though it was covered in fur that looked matted and poorly kept, the torso looked very human. This creature or being or whatever you want to call it had ears that were very pointed and reminded me of elves I see in fantasy, fan fiction, and movies. It had long, pointed ears, but they were on top of its head and pointed up. At the end of each ear was a little tuft of hair. It bared its teeth when it saw my light shining on it. I was able to see how yellow they were and how sharp they were. I became more scared and traumatized the longer I looked. And something deep inside me told me I shouldn't take any chances with whatever this was. In fact, I think it was the same fear that a mouse has of a cat, even if it has never seen a cat before. It was a predatory instinct, and I was the prey. It looked like it didn't like my light. So I turned up the brightness and shined it right in its face. This time, it winced and made a strange clicking, whining sound, as if it thought you were going to hurt it. It sounded like a whimper, but it was more like a scream. It was weird, and I don't know how to explain it. I prayed right away that this was a joke, because the way this thing showed its teeth and dripped saliva made me think I was looking at a real, horrible-looking werewolf, but I didn't believe in werewolves. This couldn't be what it seemed. I kept shining the light in its eyes, which seemed to make it go crazy. It paced back and forth, and I was afraid to take the light away from its face. For a moment. It was moving faster and getting more and more angry, so I got ready for it to attack, but it never did. Instead, it barked and barked until it finally ran away. I had to decide what to do. Sleep until sunup or leave. Right then? Both choices seemed very bad. I didn't move. But you can be sure that the rest of the night I didn't sleep at all. So how does a creature like that stay hidden in a state like Indiana, where there is so much open space? I can't help but think that it was just my luck that I was able to scare it away with a light. What do you think, though? When I thought about what happened, I realized that if I had tried to run like a normal, sensible person, this thing would have chased me down and I would be nothing but a dead body being eaten somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I felt like the only thing that could save me at that moment was to keep that light on the face of that thing. I don't know why, but it seemed to calm down for a while before getting too upset and running away.